Welcome back to our series of reactive programming with Spring Boot, and in this video we're going to talk about router functions. So in the previous one we talked about how to implement endpoints in a really similar way as we were used to do with the regular web framework. And then to start with it, I'm going to create a new controller, and even a new package, because I don't want to call it controllers. I'll prefer to call it routers to be more explicit about what we're creating. And now we can create a new Java class, and I'm going to call it router config. You see that the main difference here is that we are going to create our endpoints as functions, which is really powerful and interesting. We can do a lot of things with it, even dynamically adding or removing routes as long as we want, or starting up the application. So it's more powerful. That's the one that we're using to. What I'm going to do is to rewrite this number endpoint as a router function. So if you remember, it just return here the number 20 to the client. So in our router config, the first thing we need is to annotate it as a component. So it needs to be a component, a Spring Boot component. And then let's see how we create. So what we need to do is to return a router function to the Spring. So we need to first declare a method called, not call it, but a public, a method that returns a router function of type server response. And I'll call this just router function for now to be quite generic. And it's important that we annotate this as a bin, because Spring Boot needs to initialize this function and in order to map all of this information. And how can we return this? So I'll start with the very basics, and I'm going to do some refactor on it. Then you can see how we can get in, or can get the most of its implementation. So at the basics, we need to provide this return, okay, and we need to return a router function. So where is this route stuff? It is in the route functions dot route, okay, and you can see that this method gets a predicate and a handler function. So our predicate will be our mapping. We were using a get request, so if you go to request predicates dot get, and then we need to provide the mapping. I cannot call it numbers because going to conflict with the other one. I will just call num to make the things simple. So we have our predicate. We need to write the handler function. How can we do this? So the easiest way is to get a server request as a parameter, and then we just implement this method here. So the server request needs to return a server response. So we can just say server response dot okay dot body, and then the body will be the implementation we did the last time. So we can just use mono just. In this case I will return 100, and then we need to say the return type. So we need to say that we are returning an integer. Okay, he's complaining about something. Okay, we don't need to use the brackets in this case because we have a single instruction, so we can make the response automatically. If we just run our server as it is, let's see what's going to happen. So let's wait here to the server start. And you see the difference already in creating these mappings. We're just creating functions instead of mapping the values. So the started now. So I'm going to the browser. Our endpoint is just called num. So we just run it. I got an error here. Okay, I just missed the slash here in slash num. So with it, we will be able to get the response 100 here as expected. So if you come back and you look this, it's not that clear. We can do some optimization. So if you just say here, you can do some static imports, for example, to the root to make the things slightly better. But what if you could extract this to something else, to a different class, and just leave the router function to be a proxy and call this method? So what we can do in order to achieve this is to create a new handler as a separated class. So we can just create a new package here, call it handlers, and let's create our first handler. So it's a Java class. I will call it just num handler. Actually, we can have it as an interface first, and then we create a proper implementation. So let's think about what it would supposed to be this. We need to create an interface to return this router function, or better, a mono as a server response. So we can just declare this as a mono of type server response. We can call it num, and it's going to get a server request. So this would be our definition. Is exactly what we want to replace here with this implementation, or better, all of this. Okay, once we have this class, let's create a proper implementation for it. So now we are going to create a class. We can call it num handler info, and then we can implement num handler. Then we need to implement this method. Cool, we have the method here, so we can just implement. And what would be its implementation? Just to return exactly this information here. So we just copy it and return server response OK body of this. Cool. You can do import static import, so we can make easier to view another static import, so we can have this OK body just and that's it. And this class needs to be annotated with service, needs to be a service in order for we to inject it here. So let's replace this implementation with our new one. How can we do this? So first of all, I will declare here private final num handler, and in the constructor outer config I will get an instance of this class and just assign here. So with this Spring 2, this is the best way for you to inject anything in the class. You don't have to annotate it with the outwired annotation anymore. Spring can understand this. Once we have this, the first thing we could do here is just to replace this by numHandler dot num and provider the server request. So with this we would have it implemented. But if we just see here, we can do something better using Java. It is not saying this to us, but if we just replace this by num handler num and just ignore this, we will have the same effect. So have a look what we did here. We are using this Java 8 implementation that using this column Spring or Java knows that it needs to inject that server request as long as it calls this method. So look, the map and what it's doing is much clearer now. If we just restart our server, we need to have exactly the same behavior. So let's just wait the server to be initialized here. It's almost there. Okay, so if you just refresh here, it's working perfect. So you can see that we can clean this dependence here. You can see that you have in a different way. It's quite easier to do. If you want to add a new any other route, we just append here and route, and you just add another predicate and another handler, and you can add as much as you want. This is the preferred stuff for creating mappings with the reactive, because we are dealing with functions. You can even use the Spring security and check if you want, or feature flags, and just check startup time if you want to enable or disable or add or don't add any route during the starting process. So if you start using this, you will see that there are more flexibility and more advantage than just the previous mapping that we did here, and slightly clear as well. So in the next video we are going to create an endpoint that will simulate a flux or a stream um, of searches. And after that, with this endpoint, we're going to create even an Angular application. And with this Angular application, we're going to consume this stream, and we will see something extremely interesting. Just for you to know, as an example, if you just come here and if you get, for example, the Skyscanner website. So let's say I'm flying from Manchester to Amsterdam, and then when I hit search flight here, you see that the searches are starting to pop up as long as it gets. So here we are working as a string of data, and this is exactly what you're going to do in the next videos. So the idea is to simulate a search that returns the data to us, and as long as we get the data, we start displaying. So we're going to create an endpoint here in the Spring Boot application, and then we are going to create an Angular application to consume and display this information to the user. So you see that when finished, it's all fine. We have everything, but as long as we get the results, we start displaying. This is provides a really better and amazing experience to the final user. So see you in the next video.